and welcome to ChessLecture.com. This is Dana Mackenzie welcoming you back, where our lecture today is going to be on Learn from Your Fellow Amateurs, Episode 2. So, as you know, each month I'm soliciting games from our subscribers, and I will pick one game each month to go over in a lecture on ChessLecture.com, and the winner gets a free month subscription to Chess Lectures. So there's a little bit of incentive for you to send your games in. And so definitely I would like to put a little plug in right now. It's a good time if you're thinking about it. This is a great time for you to just jot your games down in an email or in a PGN file and send them to me. The instructions are all on the Chess Lecture homepage. So without your submissions, I can't do these lectures. So I hope that I'll get a lot more submissions in March. So this month, our winner for the contest is Larry Tamarkin, who is an expert, actually a former master, and my opinion is once a master, always a master. Anyway, he submitted this game from the Nasau Championship from 2006, a tournament that he actually won, and this was a game where he defeated a player named Salinkovic, and he tells me that this was psychologically a difficult game for him because his opponent in the past has frequently put up a fuss about the equipment that he uses in the game. Apparently he has a somewhat non-standard chess set that he insists upon using, and Larry said he was relieved that in this game the tournament director said it was okay for them to use Larry's equipment. Actually, I would like to make a small plea for peace, love, and understanding on this issue of equipment. Actually, this is just a wild guess on my part, but possibly this non-standard set of Salinkovic's could be a perfectly standard set in Russia, for example. They use different-looking chess sets than we do in the U.S. So if you ever go to Russia, you'll have to get used to pieces that look a little bit different. And so I think it's good to be flexible. But anyway, in this case, Larry got to use his own equipment. And in any case, as I said, I don't have any idea of whether this equipment was standard Eastern European or not, but just a possibility. Anyway, so Larry had white in this game, and Salinkovic had black. And one reason, let me just mention also that Larry set this game actually in January, and I didn't pick it in January, although it was a very, very strong contender. But one reason I didn't pick it back then was that actually Larry sent such excellent notes for the game that there's really not a whole lot for me to do except say, yep, Larry, you're right. And so the game that I did pick for January, I had a little bit more of my own input to give. But I will have a few things to say about this game, too. And in particular, one nice thing about this game is that it lets me fill in sort of a slight omission in the lecture series I gave back last fall about the two knights defense. So this game is a two knights defense, and it has a line that I did not actually specifically cover in my lectures, so this is a good chance for me to talk a little bit about that line. Okay, so let's get started. Larry played e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6. So this is the beginning of the two knights defense. Larry plays d4, pawn takes pawn, and e5. And this is called the modern variation. This was the subject of the fourth lecture in my series on the two knights defense. And here there are a variety of possibilities for black. You could play knight g4 or knight e4, but most players here play what certainly seems like the most principled move, which is d5. Generally speaking, in double e-pawn openings, if black can get in the move d5 without unduly weakening his position, then he has equality. And so it's definitely very consistent for black to try d5 here. So this is, as I said, called the modern variation. But in my lecture back last fall, I called it the Nimzo two the Nimzo two knights. The Nimzo two knights, because it actually has positional strategical features that are very similar to the Nimzo Indian, or generally, just in greater generality, that are similar to Nimzovic's whole strategy of playing outlined in my system. So white here plays bishop to b5, and white's goal in this variation, at least one possible method of play for white, which I think is actually very promising, is that white is going to exchange his bishop for the knight on c6, thereby messing up black's pawn structure on that side, and then he's going to play for a blockade on the dark squares. And in this way, if he succeeds, he's going to make black's 4-against-3 pawn majority on the queen side irrelevant, unable to do anything, and so then white will be in effect a pawn up on the king side and will be able to win with the king side attack. So the Nimzovician strategy is first blockade, take away all of your opponent's chances at counterplay, and then get your attack going on the side of the board where you're strongest. So a very sophisticated positional strategy for what seems initially to be a very tactical opening. So now here Salinkovic plays the standard move, knight to e4, knight to takes d4, and then Salinkovic plays bishop d7, and this is the line that I didn't actually cover in my lecture last fall. The line that I spent my time on last fall was what's considered the main line, certainly the most aggressive line for black, which is bishop to c5. But the more I think about it, the more I believe that bishop d7, as played in this game, is not necessarily any worse than bishop to c5, even though its reputation is not quite as good. And I'll say a little bit about why in just a second. Now, Tamarkin plays bishop takes knight. So one thing I said last fall is that in this variation, white generally wants to refrain from taking the knight on c6 until black has moved his bishop to d7. If white plays this exchange too early, then he would open up the diagonal from c8 to a6, and black can bring his bishop out very effectively on a6. But once black has committed the bishop to d7, then white will go ahead and take the knight on c6. Now here Salinkovic played pawn takes bishop, which is the book move, and it's almost the only move that anybody ever plays here. But actually, as I was going over this game, I started asking, well, why doesn't black play bishop takes bishop instead of pawn takes bishop? So why doesn't he play bishop takes bishop? Now, if you look at the position superficially, the answer to this is fairly evident. Black realizes he's going to get doubled pawns on the c-file, and so as long as he's going to get doubled pawns, he would like at least to have the advantage of the two bishops to compensate for that pawn weakness. And so by playing bishop takes pawn instead, he's actually offering to give up the two bishops, and still is going to have that pawn weakness, the doubled c-pawns. And so from this sort of superficial strategic argument, it seems that bishop takes c6 must be a mistake. However, when you think about it more deeply, and you realize that, as I said in my lecture last fall, white's strategy for this opening is to play a Nimzovician style. He wants to double the pawns, but what he wants to do after that is institute this complete blockade on the dark squares on the queen side. And in order to set up that blockade, he needs the knight that's on d4. He can't do it without that knight. And so the idea behind bishop takes c6 is that black realizes that, in fact, white does not want to give up that knight on d4, and so black is actually messing around with white's mind a little bit and saying, okay, here, go ahead, take my bishop. You know, I know that you will need that knight. And so, in fact, if white went ahead and goes knight takes bishop, pawn takes knight, I think this position is not the least bit dangerous for black, because white is not able to set up his blockade. If white plays castles, then black will go bishop to c5, and then if, say, well, he can't do bishop e3 yet because the pawns would be doubled. So, but also white can't play rook to e1 very easily either, because the pawn on f2 is under pressure. So a better idea for white might be to play bishop to e3 right away. But even here, bishop to c5 is perfectly good for black. And actually this brings up another point behind the move bishop takes c6, which is simply that black is sort of deadening the position by offering all these piece trades. And once enough pieces are exchanged, it makes black's position a little bit easier to play. And in particular, it takes some of the venom out of white's possible kingside attack. Because, you know, if white, after trading all these pieces, if white starts playing f4 and f5, he's not going to have a lot of stuff backing up that pawn storm. And it should be easier for black to defend. So, I bring this idea up a little bit, sort of maybe provocatively. I haven't ever actually played bishop takes bishop in a game in this position, so I don't have this sort of real world experience that you need to really pass judgment on a variation. But I did look up on ChessBase several games played with bishop takes bishop, and I didn't really see in any of those games where any of the white players really came up with a compelling refutation of this idea. So anyway, this is a recommendation for you to try if you feel like. User beware, but I think that actually this might be a really nice way of defeating white's objective of playing a Nimzovician approach to this variation. Anyway, so having said that, let's carry on with the game, where Salinkovic actually played the book move, which is b takes c. And in fact, our game is going to follow book lines for quite a long time. Okay, so Tamarkin castles here. Black plays bishop to e7. It's, again, actually, if black wants to transpose into those other lines with bishop c5, he could do so here. And after bishop to e3, for example, we would be back to a position that we could have gotten from an earlier bishop to c5. But Salinkovic, for whatever reason, perhaps just because he studied it, plays bishop to e7, thereby taking this out of the bishop c5 realm. And one of the points of this move is that black is actually keeping open the possibility of playing an early pawn to c5, which also will defeat white's intentions of blockading the queen side. The downside of bishop to e7, as we're going to see in this game, is just that it's a little bit more passive. It allows white to get his kingside attack, his kingside pawn rolling, going faster. And also we're going to see that the bishop on e7 eventually turns out to be a target, because the pawn on f2 is going to advance to f4, f5, and f6, and once it gets to that f6 square, it's going to be attacking black's bishop and really forcing an immediate crisis. So, and actually Larry's play is very, very convincing in this game, and so I would really have to question whether bishop to e7 is as good as bishop to c5. Okay, so game continues f3, chasing the knight, knight to c5, and f4. Okay, so this is a little trick that white uses very often in this variation to sort of make this advance f2 to f4 without a loss of tempo, because if black should move his knight back to e4, then it will be as if white had played f4 without even having to use up a move on it. So nice little thing to know about there. So in fact, black does play knight to e4, and so white now kind of gets his free move in, and he plays knight to c3. Now, this is another interesting move, which, if you don't know about this variation, might strike you as a little bit surprising, because white is allowing black to double his c-pawns, and you might wonder, why is he willing to take on this pawn weakness? And the answer is that actually the doubled c-pawns for white are not that much of a weakness, because they're sort of compensated by black's doubled c-pawns. So it'd be next to impossible for black to put any serious pressure on white's doubled c-pawns, because he can't open a file. And in fact, by using the b pawn to take on c3, white will actually be taking a pawn off of the b file, where it might be vulnerable to attack, and putting it on the c3 square, where it's not vulnerable at all. And finally, another nice positional point of this is that the pawns on c2 and c3 actually help resist black's attempts to move his center pawns forward. So a very clever strategic idea, and definitely this shows that you cannot play chess in a knee-jerk fashion. If you think that double pawns are always bad, then you would never think of playing a move like knight to c3, whereas actually it's a perfectly good move. Okay, Salinkovic now plays c5. We're still in book, by the way, and Tamarkin plays knight to b3, and this sort of tempts black's pawn forward a little farther to c4, and Tamarkin hops his knight back to d4. Now, it might sort of look as if white is losing some tempi with this, but actually white's not so sorry to see black advance his pawn to c4, because for one thing, those white square pawns now block the white square bishop, and also the pawns could just end up being a little bit overextended. So there's a sort of little bit of a cat and mouse game going on here, where white is luring black's pawns forward. And basically what we're going to see in this game is that the expansion of black's pawns on the queen side is nowhere nearly as threatening as the expansion of white's pawns on the king side, because those come with mating threats. Okay, here black castled. He could have played c5 right away, probably would have transposed into the game. f5, and here we go. The crisis is almost upon black. f6 is coming. Black plays c5 while he still has a chance to, and Larry plays knight to e2. Okay, now at this point, black plays bishop to c6. He had to do something to defend the pawn on d5, which was under attack. So bishop c6 is a sensible move. Sorry about the messing around with the pieces here. So bishop c6. And now Larry actually misses what could have been a very powerful move. And here he is quite aware of this. He said this in the notes he sent to me, incredibly detailed notes with lots of games from the chess databases and so forth. So he points out that there's actually a game between Natalia Kazintseva, a Russian female grandmaster, I believe, and an opponent named Genova, I don't know her first name, in 1999, where Kazintseva played the very nice move f6. And this move is really just about decisive. The point is, well, of course, first of all, the bishop on e7 has no escape, so black has got to go pawn takes pawn. And then, instead of taking back, white plays this nice in-between move, bishop to h6. And in fact, white's idea here, it looks as if white wants to win the exchange, like he's giving up a couple pawns to win the exchange. But in fact, that's not true. What white really has in mind is nothing less than checkmate. For example, if black plays pawn takes pawn, then white plays this beautiful move, knight to d4. Incredible move, sticking the knight where it can be taken two ways, but it doesn't matter because the threat is queen to g4 check, followed by queen to g7 checkmate. So black is just immediately busted. And meanwhile, also black has a piece hanging, his bishop hanging on c6. So the only move that black can really play to defend both of these threats is bishop to d7, which saves the bishop and also prevents queen g4 check. But now white has another marvelous move, knight to c6, again offering the knight sacrifice, which black cannot accept because it would be mate in two if he takes the knight. So black has to move his queen. The only square he can go to is e8. And now white has just a million ways to win this position. The move that Kasintseva played was knight takes pawn, which is perfectly good. If I were playing the position, I would have been tempted to play queen e1, threatening queen g3 check, which is also perfectly good. After something like f6, queen g3 check, king f7, knight takes pawn check, and this is just really getting ugly fast. Okay, so that would have been a very pretty line, and certainly for anyone thinking of playing this variation as black, you've got to improve before this point because f6 is just a winning move. Now, Larry didn't play that move, but even though there are 2 points in this game where Larry did not quite play the absolute best moves, nevertheless, the moves he played were extremely thematic, and and so it's one of these situations where, okay, yeah, maybe he didn't play at the grandmaster level or at the level of a computer, but still he played very consistent, consequential attacking chess and made life very difficult for black. So the move that white played here was knight to g3. Sensible move, getting the knight out of the way, threatening to bring the queen to g4, followed by bishop h6 and f6 and knight h5, and just basically the whole world is caving in on black's position. Now it's possible that black could hang on here with a move like f6, but this would be a really unpleasant move for black to have to play, letting white anchor his pawn in on e6. And black is, after all, playing for a win here too, and doesn't think his position is that bad. So he plays a nice aggressive move, which is d4. Now here, Larry could have played f6, just as before, and it's still a completely winning move. But he continues in logical fashion with queen to g4. And now Salinkovic plays queen to d5, threatening checkmate. But, of course, Larry has a nice defense, which is knight to h5, threatening a checkmate of his own. So a lot of tit for tat in this game. Okay, so now if black played something like queen takes pawn, then bishop to f4 looks pretty deadly. So he's got to defend the mate with g6, which weakens his king position. And now Larry's able to plunk in the bishop on h6. So this attack is just playing itself, really. All the pieces go to the squares where they want to be. Salinkovic plays rook to e8. And now Larry plays another very nice and very thematic move. Okay, now he's got to worry about that pawn on e5. What's he going to do with it? Is he going to defend it? Well, why defend it when you can push it and weaken your king side, your opponent's king side, even more? So basically, white's coming at black from every direction. Every white piece, the queen, the knight, the bishop, and both pawns, and also the rook on f1, are all participating in this attack. So always a great sign when you've got all of your pieces working together like this. Now here black plays bishop to d8, trying to put a little bit of pressure on white's pawn on e6. And now here is an extremely interesting position, and one that I strongly recommend that at this point you hit your pause button and try to figure out what's the best thing for white to do here. Because as it turns out, white has a completely winning move here, which the computer basically gives him like a 6 or 7 pawn advantage if he plays the right move. And Larry did not find the right move here. Nevertheless, he found a very good move. But just as a sort of exercise, why don't you hit the pause button and see if you can find the absolute crushing continuation for white. Okay, are you ready? So the computer variation is knight to f4, attacking the queen. And the obvious, problem with this move is that it seems that if black can go queen takes pawn in reply. And, if I had been playing this game, I would have seen that and I would have said, okay, well, this isn't any good for white. And probably that's what Larry thought too. But as it turns out, white has an incredible winning move here, which is knight takes g6, offering a queen sacrifice. But of course, if black takes the queen, then white plays pawn takes pawn, and it's checkmate. Have you ever seen a mate like that before? It's unbelievable. So, and of course, if black plays anything else, for example, if he goes queen takes knight, then he's just going to get ripped apart in very short order after pawn takes pawn check. And also, if black after knight to f4 plays any other moves, say such as queen to d6, then now his defense of the f7 square is weakened, and so white is going to be able to play pawn takes pawn check, luring the king out, and then pawn takes pawn check again, and then knight takes pawn, discovered check, and now the entire fortress in front of black's king has been completely destroyed, and white will be able to win very quickly. So what a fabulous line. Knight f4, that incredible queen sacrifice. But Larry didn't see it, and I think completely understandably, I'm almost certain that I wouldn't have seen it. So, incidentally, Larry in his email actually says that he asked several people what they would have done in this position, some very good players. And he found, even after telling people that there's a winning combination for white, he said that players under 2,000 were usually either not able to find it at all or it took them several minutes to find it. When he gave it to international master Jay Bonin, he was able to find the winning combination, including the queen sack, the key line, in 2 minutes and 20 seconds. When he gave it to Grandmaster Michael Rode, he got it in 1 minute and 20 seconds. And when he gave it to Grandmaster John Fedorowicz, he got it in just 58 seconds. So he saw that queen sacrifice in under a minute. So you can kind of rate yourself against all these IMs and GMs on this time scale. And if you can find the right move in 1 second, then you're either a computer or you're Roman Dzindzikashvili. So Larry jokes that Roman has probably actually already seen this position in one of his ICC games, because he's noted for playing this line as white. So the computer, of course, also just sees it instantaneously, because the queen sack occurs on the second move, and the computer gets to that depth, right away. So it sees the winning combination in under a second. Okay, so that's what might have happened, but what Larry played was actually also very good, and I think, as the game shows, completely winning, but just not quite as fabulous and all that as a queen sack would have been. So Larry played pawn takes pawn. And of course this threatens pawn takes pawn check on f7, so black has got to take back with the f pawn. And now white plays again a very natural move, knight to f6 check. here, interestingly, the computer has a sort of a hiccup. He says that using Junior, which is another well-known computer chess program, the computer recommends knight to g7, which turns out actually it's a very clever move. The idea here is that white is luring black into playing rook e7, and then he's going to play this crazy move, rook f8 check, king takes rook, knight to h5 check. And it seems like he's just going in circles, but the point is that after the king moves to g8 or e8, then white gets a fork on the queen. So a true computer variation, something that, humans would, I think, never even think of. But the funny thing is, it doesn't even work, because when I put this into Fritz, the computer program on my computer, it says black can play rook to g7. And in fact, after a few more moves of complete computer analysis, it turns out that black is completely equal. So a funny case of the computers really overthinking the position. So the natural move is knight to f6 check, and it works just fine. So every now and then, you can't trust what the computer says, even tactically. So black plays bishop takes knight, of course, otherwise he loses queen. Rook takes bishop. And now, again, white has very serious threats. He's threatening rook takes pawn check, with a checkmate in 2 moves after that. So black has got to defend this, and plays this in the only reasonable way, queen to e4. And white trades queens, and then plays rook to f1. Very natural move, getting his last attacker into the game, and making a very simple and powerful threat, which is to play e7, followed by rook to f8, with checkmate in a couple moves. So how is black going to defend this? Well, pretty much the only way is bishop to f5. And now here's, again, a really nice place to pause the position if you want to look for the best move. And this time, Larry does find the best move, and it's very pretty. He plays e7, in spite of the fact that black seems to have prevented that, because now, after black plays rook takes pawn, white is going to play g4. And, of course, if black moves his bishop away, then white is going to get rook to f8, followed by checkmate. So it looks as if white is winning the bishop. But there's still one more little wrinkle in the position that white had to foresee, which is that after rook to e6, it looks as if white's kind of got himself in too deep. The rook is hanging, and if he trades rooks, then he's got no attack anymore. So what can white do here to keep the attack going? Well, there's a very simple solution. Psychologically, I think it's somewhat difficult to see, because you've got a piece on prise. You don't always think about putting another piece on prise, but in fact that's what white does here. He goes rook on 1, takes f5, and the point is that this protects the rook on f6, and it takes away black's defender with f on f5, so that after pawn takes rook, white is able to capture on e6. So very pretty move. This is an example of what I like to call a 2-for-1 move, where the same move does 2 things at the same time. And, forks are examples of 2-for-1 moves, and many other standard types of tactics. Well, here's a somewhat unusual 2-for-1 move that is both a defense and a removal of a defender. And now black is completely lost. So he did, in fact, go pawn takes rook, and then white goes rook takes rook, black went pawn takes pawn. White just trades off to try to make the position as simple as possible so that there's going to be no chance of him goofing and losing the game. d3, takes, rook takes d3. And now at this point we have a completely won game for white. And so black actually played on for another 23 moves, but I think we can at this point stop and say that white is clearly winning. So, a wonderful game by Larry. He said it's the best game he's ever played, and I certainly agree that it's a game that he can be very proud of. And as I said, it doesn't really matter that in a couple places he didn't find the absolute best moves, because the moves he found were very natural, very consistent, very thematic, and they worked. So outstanding game, and I had a lot of fun going over it. And I hope that you all had fun seeing it, and I hope that you all be inspired to send in your own creations for our Learn from Your Fellow Amateurs game for March. So for ChessLecture.com, this is Dana Mackenzie signing out.
This is Grandmaster Damian Lemos here for OnlineChessLessons.net. First of all, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to receive more free chess videos from us, you can just click the subscribe button below. I would also highly recommend signing up for my free mail course, the 10 Grandmaster Secrets to Dominate Chess. During this exclusive course from OnlineChessLessons.net, I'll share with you my own Grandmaster shortcuts to effective attacking, defending, and growth hacks to improving your chess without complicated books or memorization. So sign up by clicking the sidebar on the right, and I know you won't be disappointed. Once more, this is Damian for OnlineChessLessons.net, and I'll see you in my videos. Thank you.